Okay, we are good to go.
Thank you so much. Good evening and welcome to the Finance and Claims Committee of the Common Council for today, Thursday, November 9th, 2023 at 7:06 p.m. We'll start with a roll call of council members. Councilmember Nora Nedelski-Eichner.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Ed Camacho.
I'm here.
Thank you. Councilmember Diana Revolus.
Here.
And Councilmember Greg Burnett. We have a quorum. Thank you. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is public participation. We did not receive any emails. Do we have anyone who is that's zoomed in as an attendee? I do not see any. So I assume there's no one dialed in to speak. So at this time, we will close public participation and move into item 4, which is the approval of the minutes from the October 12th, 2023 regular meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes as presented? All right. I saw Councilmember Nora Nedelski-Eichner's hand go up. Do we have any additions, deletions, or changes to those minutes? Okay, hearing and seeing none. All those in favor of approving the October 12th minutes show by a raise of hand electronically or verbally.
Aye.
Okay, that is unanimous. Thank you. So the minutes of October 12th are passed. The next set of minutes is from the October 18th, 2023 Common Council Finance and Claims Committee and Board of Education Finance Committee special joint meeting. Do I have a motion on those minutes? Councilmember Nora Nedelski-Eichner, thank you. Do we have any additions, deletions, or changes to those minutes? Okay, hearing, seeing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor show by a raise of hand. All those opposed have the same right. Any abstentions? Okay, Diana Revolus and Ed, I think you're an exemption also, correct?
That is, hold on a second. Sorry.
That was the special meeting of the.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I meant to unmute myself. Yes, that's an abstention. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so the minutes pass. Moving on to the agenda, items 5, 6, and 7. Starting with item 5, which is a claims committee report for November 2023. That will follow with the narrative on tax collections dated November 2023, and then finally the monthly tax collectors report dated October 2023. And we have Lisa B., our tax collector, to bring us that information. Good evening.
Good evening. Can you folks hear me?
Yes, we can.
Before we start, I'd just like to acknowledge those that served on the committee during this last term. All of you, it's been a pleasure working with you. Those who are not returning, farewell, and those who are coming back, I hope you get reappointed to the same committee because it's been a pleasure to work with all of you. Our claims this month include a very significant number still, assessment change refunds for those who requested a refund rather than a credit. So you'll see the ones that say assessment change, that's what those are about. The rest are just normal certificates of correction that the assessors do throughout the years, primarily when people get rid of a motor vehicle. There is one special request at the very end, which is basically a compilation of numerous vehicles that were overbilled to JP Morgan Chase, which is a motor vehicle leasing company. So there were pages upon pages of items that were for JP Morgan Chase, and it's being consolidated into one check for in excess of $12,000. That is the special request that does require your vote by virtue of the dollar amount. But I would be glad to entertain any questions you had on any of these claims.
Just for clarification, so that $12,531.83 is a multiple leasing claims, not a single one.
That is correct. And the list of all the different vehicles is in the claims report. It goes on for quite a bit.
Very good.
Your item 5.
Yes. So we have one item which is over $10,000 that we do need to vote on. So, but before we vote, I see Councilmember Nora Natolski-Eichner has her hand up.
Just very quickly, I know this has been a very challenging time for you, Lisa, and I'm really appreciative of the enormous amount of work that your department has undertaken. Do you feel like you're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel on kind of the cleanup here, or is there anything more that people should be aware of or expecting?
They're going to be getting bills from us in a matter of probably less than a month. So whatever needs to be shaken out or cleaned up, we'll be doing it shortly. But so far, so good.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate again all the work. I know this
Of
has taken
course.
a lot for everybody to untangle, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Right. Do we have any questions related to additional questions related to the claims committee report? Hearing, seeing none, I'll call for the question because we do need to vote and approve the special amount. All those in favor show by raise a hand or verbal.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Thank you. It's unanimous. So we will move this item forward to the next council meeting, which will be next Tuesday on November
Yes.
14th for approval, council
Yes.
approval.
And so moving on with your permission to the monthly reports, we have our October end of month spreadsheet and the narrative that accompanies that. We are at, as of the end of October, at 54.81% of our adjusted levy, which is right along the lines of where we expect it to be, very slightly ahead of where we were last year at this time. We are now, as I mentioned earlier, we are preparing for our second installment billing, which normally is in the mail to our taxpayers around the 10th to 12th of December, the second week of December. Prior to a lot of the holiday mail being out there, that is our goal. The assessor's office has been working with us because we depend on them for our supplemental motor vehicle levy, our grand list for that, which is motor vehicles that were not billed in July because they were registered after the October 1, 2022 grand list date. So anything from October 2nd through September 30th of this year, those individuals are going to be receiving a prorated supplemental motor vehicle bill that is due January 1st, payable by February 1st, 2024. Last year, this billing went out late. This year, knock on wood, and fingers crossed, it will go out early, which is what we hope. We also do a complete second installment billing for all real estate and business personal property where the second installment due. The last day to pay will be February 1st. But if we can spread that collection period out from mid-December through February 1st, our lines will be shorter. It'll be easier for everybody. That is the goal. And that is what we're working on basically as I speak. The other item that I did want to bring to your attention is the fall is a time when we do a lot of enforcement. So we are going to be working with the health department on health permit denial. If there are past due taxes due, we're doing a wage garnishment, which we do every year for city or Board of Education employees who owe back taxes. We are working on that, and we have begun working on our July 2024 real estate tax sale. About 100+ letters went out earlier this week to properties we anticipate including in the sale based on the number of years in arrears that they are. This gives the taxpayers more time to attempt to address the situation rather than waiting until the spring to send them a. We usually send them out in November if we know the properties qualify for the sales. So that happened. We're starting to gather our thoughts for that sale. Other than that, I am glad to answer any questions about either our current billing or our back billings or anything else you might want to throw at me.
Lisa,
Yes,
I might suggest you may want to report to the committee on your training at QDS.
sure. Assistant Tax Collector Al Palumbo and I went up to the QDS headquarters in Waterbury, Connecticut, and their tax team very graciously spent the better part of a day giving Al and I some training on our software system. We intend to go back. We are trying to learn to do as much as we are able to do on our own without relying on the vendor. That is sort of the way we're used to running our office, to be in control of our own destiny so we can run our own reports and get things done on our own calendar rather than someone else's. It was a very good training. They were very helpful and we're going to go back, but we're still learning. Our system, we had the conversion in March. So this is our first time going through the whole year on a software system that was foreign to us. So we continue to learn. Our staff handles it very well. The assessor staff handles it very well. So we are continuing some progress on that. But thank you, Henry.
That's great that you're going through that training. I see one hand up, Council Member Diana Revolus.
Well, first I want to say thank you for those words because I'm one of those people who's checking out. But I have a question. Just by our curiosity's sake, truly, with enforcement when it comes to employees of our municipality in particularly, and garnishment, is there any mediation to a person who's owing taxes, who works for the city and then owes? Because if it's getting to that point, and I could just see maybe the hindrance to an individual if there are owed taxes and garnishment is had, kind of concerned why that would even happen if they're an employee of the state, of our town. So is there mediations there? Because then it would turn to mediations to our residents. I'm sure there are. I'm just wondering how it looks like for someone in that predicament who also works for the state. You know what I mean? Like, just wondering.
I think I understand. So the tax collector, as tax collector, I receive at the beginning of every fiscal year what's called a warrant from the state, because taxation is actually a state power, and they grant the municipality within certain parameters the power to tax and to raise revenue through taxation to fund local services. Because the majority of our operating budget is funded by property taxes. In Norwalk's case, it's approximately 89% of our revenue is raised by taxation. The state gives tax collectors pretty broad powers on how to get that money in order to support the education system. So one of the things we can do under our warrant is to garnish bank accounts and to garnish wages of full-time employees who owe back tax. What we do by state law, we're required to make a written demand prior to initiating collection enforcement. And we do that with all of our enforcement. So we send what's basically a past due notice with the language that is required to demand. And it's legal language. It sounds a little nasty, but that's
You told us that before.
Yeah, so they
Mhm,
receive a demand and they have a significant amount of time to comply with the demand, but if they do not, we do bring a warrant to the comptroller's office for those individuals that do owe. And in most cases, their next paycheck is enough to cover the amount because it's usually a motor vehicle bill that's past due.
Mm,
But they
gotcha.
do have the time to bring it current or to reach out and say, hey, that's not me. That's my son. That's my dad.
Yeah.
So we resolve those types of issues ahead of time. But
About how long is that time, do you think? Between like 90 days, a little
it's probably
longer?
it's probably at least 90 days because we usually send the first letters in the fall and then the
Mhm.
garnishment won't actually hit until the winter. And in the meantime, a lot of them do pay because they don't
Yeah,
want
okay.
their paycheck affected. But I'm required by my warrant, if I am aware,
Mhm,
it's almost like it's my duty to bring that money in. They are
mhm,
funded by property taxes that
mhm,
are paid by other, constituents. So
mhm,
we take it seriously, and that's part of why
mhm.
we do it.
Yeah, no, of course, I completely understand that.
Yeah.
Trust me, my days, I completely understand that. And I appreciate your role in the things you do. I'm just wondering, because then we do it for our constituents, but like in particularly, let's just say, I work for here and my wages are getting garnished because I'm just wondering what mediations happen in that way, which just means the time that you guys give them. And if they're able to say, hey, is there a payment arrangement, something, because I would hate, and if it's just one, because then it's not that big of a deal. I'm just thinking mentally about like somebody working, getting garnished, and how that may look for somebody individually. But you answered a lot of my question there. It seems to be a mediation time, which would be the 90 days, and a place to say, hey, can I do this in separation time, maybe in 2 months, whatever. As long as somebody could talk and say, hey, help me, I got it. But because I've gotten to this point of back taxes, something's going on, right? So I'm just wondering if there's some type of mediation that can be done for the individual, especially working for our town. That's all.
The only mediation is to really explain what's due and if they're welcome to make payments over time,
Mhm,
but it
mhm.
doesn't stop the garnishment. We
Right,
don't,
right,
yeah,
right,
because we
right.
can't really treat the town employees any better than anybody else either.
No. Yeah, I get that. It's and I'm gonna shut up after this. But the only reason I promise you, I'll shut up after this, Lisa, I promise. The only reason
Fine.
I ask that is because if we do it for our
Mhm.
employees, then we're doing it for our constituents. So that's why
Yes.
I'm using that. And
Yep.
and I completely get it. I appreciate you answering my questions, just with seeing if there's a space and place for that, because we, not all of us, but I think a majority of us have been through something, especially like student loans, if your wages were garnished, right? Like we all know somebody who's gone through that and how detrimental that is. So I'm just
Yes.
wondering if we have space in place for our constituents to handle that without going to that extreme. That's it. And if we do it for our employees, we're definitely doing it for our constituents.
Yeah,
That's
and
all. I love you, Lisa.
thank you so much. The other thing that I should add is if there is a garnishment that is prior in right to ours, in some of
Mhm.
these cases, we don't collect anything because there might actually be something ahead of us. Child support, alimony,
Yeah,
those are
yeah,
two
yeah.
that sort of supersede ours. So it depends, but we do
Mhm.
talk with people and make them understand what they owe and give ourselves time if it's an improper billing, we want to
Yeah.
know about it before we try to garnish a pay, that's for sure. So
Yeah,
rest
that's
assured.
that's exactly where my brain is at, where certain things could be
Absolutely.
happening. Yep, I appreciate you. Thank you,
Absolutely.
Chair. Miss, I won't say anymore. Thank you, guys.
It's my pleasure.
Great. Councilmember Nora Jagelski-Eichner.
Thank you, Chair. And Lisa, this may go beyond your purview, but it's something I've wondered about in relation to the tax sale. So I know that in other municipalities and other states, they have ultimately pursued an option of having the city retain properties that don't sell at the tax sale or that where the taxes are not resolved by the owner prior to the tax sale, and have then used those properties for affordable housing purposes or other city purposes. Is that something that is legal in Connecticut, to the best of your knowledge, or do we have some sort of state law obligation that we have to sell the properties if they're not, if the taxes are not paid by the owners?
If the taxes are not paid by the owners or by a party that holds an interest in the property, like a lien holder, a mortgage holder, we offer the property at a public auction. Anybody from the public can come in and bid on that property, including the housing authority, including the city. But it would go to the highest bidder, because if the property deeds over to the new bidder, we are responsible for having offered it to a party that would bid high enough to compensate the owner for the loss of their property. So that's part of it too, because we as the city do not get in any circumstances to keep anything other than what we are owed. And that is different from a lot of other states. And there's a US Supreme Court case that was recently talked about where it was different than in Connecticut. In Connecticut, the owner or any lien holder has the opportunity to apply for the overbid, and the Superior Court determines its disposition. In some states, that doesn't happen, and the owner or those lien holders can forfeit the overbid, and the city or the municipality gets to keep it. It doesn't work that way in Connecticut. So there's no incentive for us from a selfish reason to try to solicit higher bids, but there is an obligation in case the owner loses that property to at least have offered it to the potentially highest bidder in order to provide that owner at least the best deal we could sell their property for, if I explained it as well as I could.
To try to
No, thank you.
indemnify them
That's-
as much as possible,
I
that
beg
type of
pardon?
thing. To type of indemnify them as much as possible.
Well, what happens is suppose that you only owed $50,000 in taxes, but I sold your property for $500,000. I'm not entitled to keep the extra, but you should at least get it, either you or someone else who had a lien on your property. If you don't redeem that property prior to there's 6 months after the sale, you can still redeem and keep it. You basically have to pay off the bidder what you originally owed in interest on their bid. But if that does not happen and you end up losing the property, I have to file the deed in the name of the new owner. The least you should be able to do is go to court and say, hey, I have now lost my property, but the city sold it for $500,000. Please give me the value that's left after the taxes were paid.
Right. And I am very relieved that that is Connecticut law. I'm actually familiar with the Supreme Court case you're referring to, and it's actually really quite appalling what happens in some other states. But I am curious about the sort of, so it's an interesting idea you raised that the city could bid on the properties. Something for us to keep in mind. I just was curious because I know that other states have handled it. They've sort of gone the land bank route and other things. So thank you. I appreciate the explanation. Just one of the many things I'm trying to learn as we sort of think about options we can pursue. So thank you.
Absolutely, of course.
Where do these auctions take
can-
place? I'm so sorry. Can you just say that again? So sorry, Chair, and so sorry, Nora. Where do those auctions take place?
I didn't quite understand your question.
When and where do those auctions take place? I'm sorry. Just on Nora's
Auctions?
question. Auctions.
Oh,
auctions.
the tax sale?
Yeah. Just where?
The tax
when
sale-
do those-
It'll take place in, I believe, July of 2024. And it'll take place in the concert hall
Mhm.
at City Hall.
Okay. Okay.
And
Thank you, Jack.
and prior to that, all of the properties that are up for sale, Lisa and her team will have pictures of those properties on display in the foyer of City Hall so that interesting parties can come see those properties along with any relevant information about those properties.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And thank you for that question, Nora. I'm so sorry. I told you guys I wouldn't talk anymore.
I do have a quick question for Lisa.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Lisa, I think I understand why the balance of the monies, in other words, the overage, the overbid, is not automatically or summarily returned to the deed holder or the lien holder, because I guess people can come forward with some sort of equity interest in the property or something like that. So you don't want to, you want that to be left for a court to determine.
But
Is that why? it's
the
automatically?
the statute requires us to turn the money over to the Superior Court. We're not
I got you.
allowed to make any determination, and we give a copy of the title search that we had commissioned prior to the sale that identifies anyone with a co-ate interest, a recorded interest on that property. And we give that information right to the Superior Court along with a copy of the deed and some other things so that they can identify when those parties might come forward. We try to make it easy for the Superior Court to determine where that overbid should go, to the owner or to someone with a prior lien. And then in some cases, other parties come, after the fact that they got wind of the fact that the property was sold. And they will present their case to the court as well, but we're not involved with that at all. Well, the statute actually precludes us from being involved. All we can get is our taxes.
I understand. I guess I missed that step. I wasn't aware that the monies are automatically turned over to the court.
By us, yes, they
Yeah,
are.
that makes sense. Okay. All right.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Of course. There'll be more about the sale as we go forward. And we also have a very comprehensive website that explains the process and and gives people information about the properties that is public information, such as copies of the field card and things like that. But typically if it could comfort us at all, if we start with 200 properties, just so everyone is aware, all but about a dozen will pay their taxes prior to the sale. That's typically about what happens. If we start with 200, we may end up with a dozen and all the others will pay because of course the goal is not, in a perfect world, we wouldn't sell anything at all, right? The owners would all pay their property taxes prior to the sale and we wouldn't have to have an actual sale at all. That is the goal, is to collect money that is due to the city, not necessarily to transfer title to anyone's property.
Right. Thank you.
Of course.
Have we run into a scenario that you can recall where we did not receive any bid on a property?
Yes, it happens regularly.
And
then-
what's the action that takes place in that scenario?
What we usually do is we wait until the next sale and try again. We could do that. We could take lower bids or the city could bid in. Those are the three options. And it's something we usually discuss ahead of time, with everybody involved on the administration end to see if there were any interest in those properties. We send out to the abutting owners because sometimes the only one who might be interested in it would be a neighbor. It's a tiny piece of land that would augment their own property. So we go that route as well.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, do we have any additional questions? Okay, if not, thank you, as always, Lisa, for the great update. And as I mentioned previously, we'll move the claims report to the full council next week for approval.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Great.
Thank you, folks. It was good working with you.
Thank you.
See you next month.
Moving on to item 8 on the agenda was the tax assessors update on the reval process. Our interim tax assessor is unable to join us, but he did give me a update. which I'll read, starting with the update from Vision Government Solutions. And Vision is basically working on the reval as it relates to residential properties. They're currently on track to send the valuation notices to residents' properties in the first week of December. Data collection has been completed. There's a handful of parcels that have been flagged during field review for remeasuring, so they'll go back out to finish that work. Those parcels will be visited very soon for remeasuring. Building permit work has been completed as of Tuesday, on November 7th. Field review will be has been completed as of November 3rd, and data entry changes are up to date as of this time. A complete residential A through Z analysis is currently on the way. And they now have included recent sales that have come in since August. So they're covering the entire footprint. And further adjustments will be made over the course of the next few weeks. Quality control reports will be run over the 2-week period prior to notice mailing. The revaluation information brochures have been printed and will be distributed to local libraries, realtor offices, etc., so that the community can be aware of what is taking place with the reval. And we're holding an informational meeting at the community room next Wednesday, November 15th, beginning at 7:00 p.m. And both Vision Government Solutions and Safeguard Analytics will be providing presentations on the reval. This will be a in-person and Zoom meeting, so it's a hybrid meeting. And again, presentations will be made, and then there'll be a question and answer period that Vision and Safe Ground will field those questions and answer those that may come up.
Safeguard?
Safeguard, correct. Safeguard.
Right.
Well, it was sent to me as Safe Ground, so help me up.
Close enough for government work.
Okay. And the update on the commercial side, all commercial documentation analysis is complete. All cost income models are in their system. All commercial properties have draft preliminary values on them. All state of Connecticut and AAO tests have been performed and indicate that the values and ratios are met or exceeded standards. Roughly 50% of all the commercials have had final reviews, so still more work to be done there. All final review commercial values will be completed by November 30th, at the end of this month. Notices will be mailed and appointments will be set up with assistance from Vision for any commercial properties to meet with the vendor. So that is the update as of now. I think the key item there is that next week, again, we'll have the informational session so that the public can first hear the presentation and understand the process, and then secondly, ask any questions that they might have. Any questions related to the tax assessor update? Okay, hearing seeing none, we'll move on to item 9 on the agenda, which is to receive the Oak Hills Authority monthly financial statement for September 2023. And we have Alan Dutton from Oak Hills Park Authority to give us the update. Good evening.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. For the month of September, Oak Hills Park Authority, I'll just give you receive the information and I'll give you a brief overview of the actual month, where we are year to date and how it compares to last year, just in areas of revenue, expenses, and then year-to-date income. So the month of September, our revenues were $12,000 ahead of budget. 13,000. Actually, my apologies. $12,000 under budget on the revenue side. 244 compared to 257. However, our expenses were about 20,000 below our budget. We didn't spend as much money on water that we thought, because it's been a lot wetter this year than it was compared to last year. And we spent less money on chemicals as well. $20,000 savings. So from a bottom line perspective for the month of September, we were $8,000 over our budgeted income. We actually made $84,000 compared to a budget of 76. That's for the actual month of September. 3 months year to date, we find ourselves, our revenue is $51,000 over our budgeted number, 911 compared to 962. So revenues ahead of budget. And our expenses were, we were able to actually save about $4,000 on our expenses on a year-to-date basis. So after 3 months, we're $55,000 ahead of our budgeted income. 388 was the actual budget, was 333, which is very good so far. But if you compare it to where we were last year in those 3 months, we're actually about $19,000 under what we did last year, same period. Our expenses are about $18,000 higher compared to last year. Obviously, we have a general manager position now. We didn't have that in the past. So overall, we're on a year-to-date basis about $37,000 behind what we did last year, but obviously still better than budget. So from an operating point of view, we still continue to do pretty well for the first 3 months.
Alan, when you say
Yep.
year to date, are you going from July on a
July,
fiscal-
August, September. Yeah, 3 months year to date. July, August fiscal. July, August, September, Henry.
Okay, so we're now getting into the slower non-existent season.
Correct. So
And
now
we
we get into the
finished
slow
strong
the good
from
news-
April to June, right?
The
Okay,
good news is we've got $836,000 in the bank as of the end of September.
Yeah.
So I think we'll be okay. So we do have about $225,000 in a CD. We've got $225,000 in a sweep account, which we can move money in and out of. And we have about $375,000, which will get us through the period of the next 3 to 4, 5 months. Now, obviously, we're going to have some capital expense over the next, few months. Not a lot of money, but from a cash point of view, I think we're more than okay as far as that is concerned. So, are there any questions on the operations, financial side? And if not, I can take some. I'm going to talk about the capital and a couple of other things. Any questions? On the capital side, we've actually, in the last couple of weeks, we've completed the car pass between holes 1 and 2, which any of you play golf know it's like going on a roller coaster, going from T1, first hole to second hole. It's horrible. That has been broken down. We have a new car pass between holes 1 and 2. We've also completed the car paths between holes 11 and 12. I drove it a few days ago, and it's really great. So those 2 projects were done. We also put some blacktop down in front of the rental housing and a small amount in front of the starter's hut. And that has been completed. We're in the planning processes for our capital budget for next year. The major project, which has been identified by the golfers, by the users, and by the authority, is the traps and the bunkers. Will need to be renovated, upgraded. It's the biggest complaint we have. It is a big project. It's a 2-year project, probably about $420,000 for 25. We're looking to start that project in fiscal 2024-25. And we're now in the planning process now. We'll need to get that ordered and contracted. We're getting the bids in. We will have the cash flow available, especially for the first part of the project. And this is what we are currently working on from a major capital point of view. And finally, we're in the final stages of negotiating a mutually agreed upon dissolution agreement with Dry Dock Smoking Aces, which we'll expect that agreement to end on January the 7th. So we're currently in the process of finalizing the restaurant. It's a mutual agreement. It's somewhat of an amicable agreement, which I think will benefit both sides. So all things being equal, next year we will have a different concessionaire. We're working with the city of Norwalk and their purchasing department to come up with an RFP, which we will put out to different vendors. We'll put down what the requirements would be, what we look at, and we will be starting the process. And all things being equal, we'll have a new vendor by the next season, March of next year.
Councilmember Ed Camacho, you have a question?
Yeah, I do have a question. It seems at this point fairly clear that that the restaurant concept that doesn't really work for Oak Hills. I mean, the vendor that was there now is, a seasoned vendor. They, it's not like someone that opened up a restaurant for the first time. So, have you guys given any thought to some other use of that space that's more complementary to a golf course, shall we say?
I think Ed, I think you hit the nail on the head, basically. I think we need to look at, and we've had some interest already unofficially. We need to look at vendors who operate municipal golf courses, and be interested in looking at ours, not vendors who are work in private clubs or vendors that just have restaurants, because municipal golf course restaurant is a unique place. Of course, it depends on how much space you have for private parties, etc. As well. But I think this is the type of person that we need. We need someone who's done this before and is not just reinventing the wheel. And I think if we position it correctly, and it is a good opportunity. It's a turnkey operation because we own the tables, the chairs, the televisions, and it's just recently renovated, and it's large space in the kitchen there. It's a good opportunity. It's structured correctly. But I agree with you that we're looking to bring in a seasoned person who's used to doing this and working in this environment.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think some other out of the box, not out of the box necessarily, but someone that some other use that is more consistent with.
Right. I mean, the possibilities of driving ranges in the winter, to stimulate some growth there, we could put those in. We're looking at all angles.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Alan, in the area of capital projects that you mentioned,
yeah,
is there anything on the docket for the nature trails, tennis courts, any activity beyond the golf course?
Yeah, tennis courts is an ongoing tennis courts. If I mentioned that, is there's a great bunch of people there. I mean, they actually fundraise themselves for the pergola they put up and for other areas. But tennis courts is definitely an area. We did spend money on putting up new fencing for 3 of the courts last year. We also did some refinishing of the concrete work there. But I do think an area that we should concentrate more on is the nature trail area. And I think possibly identifying someone who could possibly come on the commission who may be involved in that may be a good route to go. But I agree with you that it's something that we should not lose. We did put a couple of $1,000s into the nature trail area, but I think it's an area that we should look more at. I agree.
Alan, can I make a suggestion?
Of
You may
course.
want to consult Robert Stowers, who's our head of Parks and Recreation.
Well, we do more than consult because he's a member of our board.
Okay, there you go.
So
But
we-
I just know he has wide experience.
We did,
And
and
he may be
So-
doing things on the city side, but he may have ideas for you on the Oak Hill side, and coordination would probably be helpful.
we reached out to Robert, especially on the RFP side, to get his input to say, we're finalizing the document now as to what goes into it, and he gave us some very good help on it. So
Good.
we're kind of having him on our board is a great addition, should I say, Henry?
Well, you're always a day ahead and a dollar ahead of me, so I'm glad to hear it.
Always glad to be ahead of the controller, the money guy. Thank you.
Great. Yes, Council Member Diana Revelous.
That's where I wasn't gonna say nothing. I just want to know with Oak Hills because not too long ago, with the question I asked before, you guys showed efforts in doing so and engaging the community who doesn't normally golf or who's not in the. That being said, in thoughts of with the nature space, of course, or with the reacclimation of something like the restaurant, how does that work with maybe ideas of bringing and engaging community members who don't normally golf, and in particularly youth? Can those spaces be helpful in creating something that then usually brings youth or families that don't normally engage in golf to just know that this is an opportunity that's available here, or even if it's done like on special days at lower cost or whatever? Like, are those ideas in the works, especially with Mr. Stowers on your board?
I think that's a really, really good point. I know that tennis has been reaching out to different communities in the Norwalk area on the youth side to try and foster the use of further use of the tennis courts. And I know that Paul with some of the youth, some of his youth programs. I know he works with schools, high schools. I'm not sure how far deep it goes, but I think that's a really good idea that we need to improve in this area. And I think reaching out to people that can help us, and Robert Stowers, directors of Park and Rec, and it's something that I will bring up at our next meeting. Thank you.
And I appreciate you. No, thank you. And just sadly to throw it out, there are places and spaces that children just don't get engaged with for exposure, right? So not only an engagement for playing golf, but how about like entrepreneurial internships that may be bringing youth to see how it's like to be a part of a municipal golf course in a different way, like in a managerial way or some sort as well.
Yeah, there's definitely, on the restaurant side, it might be a little difficult, but because
not the restaurant side.
However, on the golf side, on the golf pro side, we have people that work, they couldn't be starters, but there is an opportunity to work with some of the other people, sit with a ranger, or come and work with a general manager. I mean, I did that myself when I was general manager. We worked with schools in New York City that came to us and looked around.
Right.
And I think that's a really good idea as well.
I would love to see that happen with our municipality golf course, and I thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Any other questions or comments for Alan? Okay, great. We appreciate the update, and we're getting into the cooler months, so these will be the lean months, but sounds like you have a lot of great work ahead during the winter season to prepare for next spring. So
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you. Moving on to item 10 on the agenda. We have an authorization which reads as follows: authorize the purchasing agent to issue purchase orders to 443 Technologies for the supply of a Newtonic HCI system, an amount not to exceed $175,014, account number noted, budgeted in the 2023-2024 IT capital item. Do we have a motion on this item?
Motion.
Thank you. Councilmember Diana Revelous moves the item, and we have with us Dave Hop from the Norwalk Public Schools IT department to give us the background on this authorization.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett, council members. So yes, the BOE Technology Department got into HCI system just over 6 years ago, and we're looking to refresh that into a new system. So HCI is hyper-converged infrastructure. So basically what that means is we have a system where it takes all of our storage, all of our processing, and the networking, and it puts it into one system, instead of having, say, separate storage arrays, servers, and networking. Excuse me. I'm sorry. When we moved into this a few years ago, it really puts everything into one simple solution to look at instead of having to manage multiple systems for these items. So we store all our student save files. We have all of our virtual machines stored in this area, and that's what we use it for. The newer system is going to allow us to move into what's called VDI, which is virtual desktop infrastructure, which will allow us to give some of the students who are doing more high level stuff with the with NCC to do coding classes where we can unlock a desktop for them to use that's not locked down in the traditional sense where we don't allow kids to do too much. Then I'll answer any questions.
One question I have that, anytime you have a system where you're doing any conversion or bringing together, files, etc., always concerned about the security aspect of that. Can you touch on that
Sure.
for a moment?
So, of course, so the system itself has built-in security for these things. So similar to how it would be if it was separate items where, logins and certain rights to different files and stuff. It does the same thing. And then it also has access policies for the people who log in and manage the system. So certain people can only see certain things or work on certain other pieces of the system, excuse me.
David, can I ask a question? And it's
Yes, sir.
based on a lack of knowledge.
Of course.
Because I deal with cybersecurity on the city side. I worry sometimes about centralizing things because it makes it more vulnerable and maybe easier to attack, or the whole thing goes down at one time. So you're saying the advantages of centralizing outweigh the negatives?
So it's centralized, meaning everything's one system, but there are redundancies built into it. So our current system, it's built together, we can have a failure of a single node. With the new system, we should probably be able to handle a failure of 2 nodes, and still everything stays up. All the virtual machines shift to an active node, all the storage is moved to active storage. There's redundancy there. The cyber piece is, well, this is an internal piece. It's not connected outside. So it's still, we still manage it like we would a separate array or a separate server.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any additional questions or comments relating to this authorization? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor of this authorization, either verbally, all hands are up. Great, it's unanimous. So Dave, we will be moving this item to the next council meeting on Tuesday, November 14th for full council review and approval.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, moving to the final item on the agenda, update on the fiscal year 2024-2025 operating and capital budget cycles. And we have Chief Financial Officer Henry Dakowitz to give us the update.
Thank you. Pretty brief. We are right on target. October 28th, the finance department, the budget department sent out pro forma packages to all the departments, which give them certain numbers to start with for their fiscal 25 budgets, primarily on payroll, where we know the number of people who are on payroll. We know the increases, or usually based on union contract, and the step increases. So we complete that in advance for them. We are in the process of negotiating new contracts with all the unions. So what we have done from a budgeting point of view is we have put in the same 2.35% increase from our prior contracts with the unions. And we are also budgeting in case the union contracts come in at a different number. So it's at the department level, it'll be the 2.35, and sort of citywide, we will reserve funds in case the numbers come in at a different amount. From October 31st to November 18th, approximately 3 weeks, the city departments have an opportunity to review the numbers we've given them, to look at what they believe their projections are. And then at the end of that process, they will give us their requested budgets. And then the budget department has about 2 weeks to review it. And from December 5th through December 21st, so after Thanksgiving, but before Christmas and New Year's, the budget department meets with each department, goes over our pro forma, their requests, we have dialogue, and we ultimately end up with a mayor and CFO recommended operating budget. So we're right on target with the operating side. On the capital side, November 4th, the budget department circulated pro formas or budget packages for each department on the capital projects. They have till December 16th to complete their forms. It's on a staggered basis. So for example, IT has capital requests based on what all the individual departments need. So it takes them longer to compile their numbers. And there are other departments which can do it much quicker. So we stagger the requests based on the perceived need of time. And then Thursday, December 22nd, the Board of Ed submits its capital budget requests, and it's at that late date simply because they have to wait for their Board of Education meeting and approval. Then from January 3rd to January 10th, Finance and Planning and the Zoning Department meet with each department to review their requests. And later on, from January 18th, January 11th, the Finance and Planning and Zoning staff meet with the Board of Ed. January 18th to 19th, they meet with the departments to review their requests. And then January 27th, on or before, the CFO compiles and transmits requests together with recommendations to the Common Council, the Board of Estimate, and Planning and Zoning Commission. So I recommend capital first, then there's discussion by Planning and Zoning, and they make a recommendation, and ultimately the mayor will come out with his recommendation for capital. So we're right on target. It's a long season, but we spent a lot of time on the calendar based on our experience from prior years.
Quick question, well, first of all, thank you for walking us through the roadmap going forward over the next few months related to both capital and operating budget. The department reviews take place, I think you indicated in the December timeframe?
On the operating budget,
Yes, on the operating.
December 21st.
Okay, so we being the finance committee council, at that time, would we be able to kind of get a preliminary view of what has been submitted, or is that too early?
I think it's too early. What usually happens is we send a pro forma, they review it and send a request, then we sit down and then we make a recommendation. Our pro forma is based on the guidance we get from the mayor on what he wants the total budget to come in at. Their requests are often based on what they feel are their needs, and we discuss it. We discuss it based on historical expenses, the environment, and what we can afford. And then we come out with recommendations. So I think what tends to happen is that's more internal. And then once the CFO and mayor recommended budget comes out, that's when we share it with everyone.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions? Councilmember Nora Nadelsky-Eichner.
Thank you, Chair. Henry, could you send us that calendar? Because I didn't see it in our packet.
Sure, I think it was circulated earlier.
Oh, in a separate email. Okay.
Yeah, sure. I'll send you, I'll make sure you get both the operating and the capital budget calendars, of course.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. Yeah, and I apologize if I missed it. I just didn't see it in the packet. I may have missed a separate email.
Is question, is this the same calendars that was shared during the joint meeting with the Board of Ed, or
I
have there
believe
been
it is.
updates?
I'm looking at documents that were prepared. The operating budget was prepared October 26th, according to my records. So I think we circulated it at that time. And not a problem. We'll get that to you so that you have it as well.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. And I apologize then if I missed.
You're welcome.
All right. Any questions of our CFO on the operating capital budget cycle?
I know it's
Yes.
very, very preliminary, but do we have a sense yet of kind of, with inflation having been high, are we anticipating sort of a commensurate kind of inflationary increase in our budget? Do you have a sense of kind of, globally, what were you thinking people should be aware of? I mean, obviously we heard your presentation at the joint committee meeting, but I'm just wondering if, a month later you have sort of further thoughts on things we should be prepared for or not.
I think it's ultimately up to the mayor, who looks at the broadest vision, both looking at the entire city and Board of Ed and also current versus past and future. I would just say the major factors are the union negotiations. Of course, inflation, but then there's the revaluation, which will ultimately affect average tax bills. So those are the factors we're trying to incorporate. But I think it's premature for me to make any comment on where that will end up.
Okay. And it's very early. Follow-up question with that though. As I understood it, and maybe I'm wrong, so I would love some clarification if I am. When we complete the revaluation, as it is very likely that many people's homes will be valued higher, it is possible that we will therefore decrease the mill rate, because we are looking to achieve sort of we're not assuming that that the mill rate will stay the same even though valuations have gone up. Is that correct? Or is it possible that we will?
Let me explain what assessors and tax collectors have educated me over the years.
Yeah.
If everyone's property, residential and commercial, went up 10%, then the average tax bill will go up by what the net tax levy is, the spending minus revenue. My first year here, we had a $500 million mall that came online. So assuming everyone's assessment was about the same, the people in that district had less of an increase because the mall picked up some of that increase for that district. Okay, so it's all based on relative changes in assessment. The big issue with the revaluation is residential versus commercial. Okay. My understanding is most of commercial, like office space, is flat to down. However, apartment buildings, which are included in commercial, have gone up because of those values. So that increase by apartment buildings will offset some of the other reductions. But you are correct, from what my understanding is, there's been such an influx of people, especially from New York, combined with a very unique market where, because interest rates are high, sellers are often not putting their property on the market because they don't want to exchange their 2 or 3% mortgage for a 5 or 6%. So what's happening is those that are selling, it's a supply and demand. With less supply, the prices go up. So now your comparable values have gone up. Is that real forever, or is it based on this temporary function? However, we do a reval as of October 1st, 2023. So they do all the measurements, they do all the calculations, and they look at comparable prices. So residential looks very strong here in Norwalk. So when they finish their evaluations, we'll see what those numbers are. But let's just say if residential goes up, and let's say that commercial stays flat because of the factors, then just like the mall absorbs some of the increase, the residential would have to take more of that increase. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. But I think I was asking an honestly even more basic technical question,
Okay. Yeah.
which is, so if a house was 5 years ago, a house was valued at 100,000.
Yes.
This reval is valued at 200,000.
Yes.
The mill rate, I mean, we may or may not, but the mill rate may not. It's not that everyone is now instantly going to be paying the same mill rate on $100,000 more value, right? The mill rate may adjust to sort of compensate for the fact that there have been increases in there have been system-wide increases in value.
Well, but just remember, we set mill rates by district, not by an individual home. So let's assume if you said 100,000 to 200,000, all the homes in that district, and it's only residential, no commercial. So
Right.
all the homes doubled in assessment. You're right. The mill rate would have, and we would get the same amount of taxes. But if the spending and net tax levy goes up, instead of having, it might go up a little. But
Sure,
net-
absolutely. But yes, no, I get that. I mean, I just want to make sure that I was understanding
basic
fundamentally
math,
the-
what happened is in 2013, I believe, which was a reaction of after the 2007 decline, 2008, in 2013, it went up. So the values went up, I think it was by 15%. So the mill rate went down, but the average tax bill went up. So.
Right. Okay. But I just want to make sure I understood that fundamental relationship, because I had gotten a couple questions of people panicking, and I was like, no, I don't think you should assume that you should be getting the same mill rate on the higher values. So, okay.
Right.
And
But
I do
it
appreciate
becomes-
the distinctions though about the rebalancing between commercial and residential.
Right.
I do, that's going to be
Right.
very,
And it should become more clear as soon as the revaluation is finalized. And Greg, you mentioned that the initial notices will go out in early December about the revaluations. We'll start to have a sense of where people end up.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I appreciate
You're welcome.
Any additional questions or comments? Okay, hearing, seeing none. Thank you so much, Henry. We appreciate that update.
You're welcome. Mr.
And we'll stay close over the next few months,
Yes, we will, as always.
as always, right? So with that,
I'm
it
just
is
gonna say,
hold on.
wow.
It is time for item 12. And I just want to thank those members of the Finance Committee who are, this is their last meeting of the Finance Committee. And really appreciated working with you and your input and participation. And I think it's time for Councilmember Revelous to do what you have done so well in so many meetings.
I just wanted to say, Henry, I really do appreciate you. I wish you were my math teacher so many years ago. And I'm going to give my final motion to adjourn. I appreciate being on this council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I second it or I'm not allowed?
The motion has the motion has
ahead.
been made. I'll call for the question. All those in favor? I think it is beyond unanimous. Thank you so much, Diana.
Thank you
Best of
all.
You're
luck to
very
you.
welcome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Pleasure working
We
with you. Thank
We
you.
stand adjourned 8:17 p.m. Thank
Happy
you. Have a great.
Thanksgiving.
All right.
Have a
Take
good
care.
night, everybody.
Bye-bye.